that metaphorical substrate, you're in the domain of religious phenomenology. And I think that not only can you derive that conclusion as a consequence of deep philosophical thought and literary analysis, but that if you know enough about brain function, you'll also come to the same conclusion. I think you come to the same conclusion as well if you look at the evolution of religious cognition from the perspective of an evolutionary biologist and not from the position of an evolutionary biologist whose head is addled by the belief that most of human morality was established in the 500 years since the Enlightenment. So that's a start, I guess.
Except, and so you have to bear with me, because I'm from Texas.
That's okay. I'm from Alberta, you know. It's bigger than Texas, just as bad.
Yeah. So the curious thing for me is all of that applies, seemingly, if I'm understanding it, to religious thought, religious tradition, the value of religious identity to individuals. And I don't see that any of it relates to whether or not there is a God or whether or not there's sufficient reason to believe there's a God, which is my sticking point. I'm fully fine with the idea, we'll try and get through this without, like, raucous applause, but, you know, hey, at least I got one.
Yeah, you don't never complain about raucous applause.
Because that's the sticking point for me. I have no problem acknowledging that people derive value from their beliefs, whether or not they map to anything in reality, that they can be inspired and motivated, educated, and enlightened by poetry, prose, metaphor, allegory. But my concern is, having grown up a fundamentalist Southern Baptist, the people who I know and some of the people who are working to enact legislation on behalf of their beliefs are convinced that they have good reason to believe that there actually is a God, not just that it's useful to them.
Well, it's not that easy to distinguish between what's useful and what's real. So I think that distinction can be made, but it's a lot more difficult than people generally think. And I also think that there's no doubt that there are different levels of sophistication of religious belief. You know, what I see happening in this sort of discussion, say frequently, you know, and again, like I said, I have a fair bit of respect for the atheist types because they spend a lot of time thinking, and that's generally a good thing. You know, I see most of their thinking, however, directed at the fundamentalist types, the fundamentalist Christian types, mostly of the American persuasion, who suffer from the somewhat understandable illusion that the biblical corpus has the same epistemological and ontological status as a scientific theory, when it clearly doesn't, right? I mean, if you're
Okay, now we're closer to the same page.
Okay,
yeah.
If you're a religious thinker, let's say, if you're a serious student of religious thought and a serious philosopher, one of the things you can't claim is that whatever story the Bible is telling is a scientific theory. And that's just self-evident. First of all, like, when was the first scientist? Descartes, Bacon, Newton? Maybe you could chase it back to the Greeks, but no farther than that. And so the idea that whatever the people who conjured up the Old Testament creation account were doing was something akin to scientific theorizing is a mistake that would only be made by people who don't know how to distinguish between different kinds of truth. And so the fundamentalists, like, I feel for the fundamentalists, you know, because what they're trying to do, to give them credit, is to maintain a corpus of stories in which an ethos is based. That would be the Western ethos, in this case of Christianity, because they believe that the ethos is of extreme value. And I also believe that the ethos is of extreme value and that it is nested in those stories. And so they don't like to be confronted by the rationalist, atheist, evolutionary types because it blows the foundation of their ethos apart, and they feel that it's worth preserving. And I think, well, yeah, it is worth preserving. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't philosophical problems associated with the manner in which they construct their arguments. But, well,
what I'd like
they're still worthy. But it doesn't address the issue. There's a deep issue here that that we're not contending with. You know, here's an example. This is, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think so. I just finished, well, I thought about it a lot, you know, and I do try to think about where I'm wrong, because I would like to figure out where I'm wrong, because then I wouldn't have to be wrong anymore, right? And being wrong is actually not a good thing. You fall into a pit if you're wrong.
And this is what I point out in the lecture on skepticism, since you didn't get to see the show, is that being wrong feels exactly like being right. Nobody runs around going, oh, I'm wrong, but I'm going to keep believing this. We all assume that we are correct about a great many things. And it's not so much that being wrong is the thing we're afraid of. I think that being exposed as wrong is the thing we're afraid of.
Well, we're also sometimes afraid of being wrong, because if you're wrong at a deep level, it can really hurt you.
Oh, I agree,
It can really take you apart. And so people don't like to be taken apart. Like if you're wrong about your wife, for example, that tends to be a very painful thing. And that's something that's worth pursuing, to try to figure out why that is.
That's why I had the frying pan.
That should make you popular. Okay, so one of the issues that I have, and you can respond to this, is that let's say the celebrity atheist types, because I actually like that phrase, they don't seem to me to be contending with the real issues. They seem to be going. What are the real issues? Dostoevsky, he's a real issue. Tolstoy, he's a real issue. Carl Jung, 20 books and maybe 15 seminars, he's a real issue. Mircea Eliade. Like, there are some serious heavy hitters in the religious phenomenology domain. And my sense so far, I just finished reading all of Harris's books, for example, he doesn't contend with them at all. And it's like, for me, that's like being an evolutionary biologist and not being aware of Darwin. It's actually a big problem. It's not something you can hand wave away. Jung was a mystic. It's like, sorry. He was about as smart as Friedrich Nietzsche.
I think this gets to basically the same point I was talking about before. The thing that you're objecting to, it seems, is that many of us don't want to address the aspects of religion that you find value in, because we're only focused on, perhaps as I'm talking in the show, from a scientific skepticism perspective of, are there valid and sound arguments that would lead one to conclude that a God exists? My answer to this so far seems to be no. And the apologists, the theologians, they keep presenting the arguments, the teleological arguments, moral arguments, and all these things. They have nothing to do with the phenomenology of religion. They have nothing to do with how this impacts people's lives. This is a question of, is it in fact the case? Is it consistent with reality that there is a God? And is it consistent with reality that there is good reason to believe there's a God? That is where the focus is primarily.
Yeah, and it's usually construed as a scientific issue.
Well, it's not so. I would never construe it as a scientific issue, because science can't confirm the supernatural. I mean, we are blocked until somebody demonstrates a mechanism by which we can explore and confirm the existence of the supernatural, and then confirm that it actually can impact the natural world. We're stuck, which is why science relies on methodological naturalism.
You seem to be able to do it with psychedelic drugs.
You seem to be able to do what with psychedelic drugs?
Well, everybody that takes them under reliable settings generally comes back and claims the presence of a mystical experience.
Yeah,
and that seems to be duplicatable and replicable across cultures, in labs, with multiple different substances, the chemical constituents of which are known very well. It's like, it's part of this religious phenomenology. And to me, that's just a set of facts. And we know that people have been using those substances to evoke mystical and religious experiences for, who knows, 150,000 years maybe. Sure. We can at least infer that. And we have no idea whatsoever how much of an effect the use of those substances has had on the metaphysical substrate of our culture. Like, so what constitutes scientific data here is by no means clear. Here's an example of this, for example. So,
well, before the example, yeah? As someone who's been high as a kite, I fully agree that people take drugs and report experiences that they describe as mystical or supernatural. Just like people report other experiences as if they were religious or ghosts or whatever. We have no way of confirming that something mystical or supernatural actually happened. What this is about the language.
Stops people from smoking.
Well, you can stop smoking without any sort of supernatural intervention.
No, not really.
You can't stop smoking without supernatural?
There aren't really any reliable chemical means for inducing smoking cessation. You can use a drug called bupropion. I think that's the one. It's whatever Wellbutrin is.
Is that supernatural?
No, you don't need a supernatural effect, but it doesn't work very well. But if you give people magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and they have a mystical experience, they have about an 85% chance of smoking cessation with one treatment. But that's kind of like evidence, you know. It's kind of like evidence.
It's evidence that you can take mushrooms and increase your chance of quitting smoking. But
no, it's not. It's indication that if you take mushrooms and you have a mystical experience, you'll stop smoking, because it doesn't work if you don't have
if
the
you
experience.
take mushrooms and you have an experience that you describe as mystical, then you'll increase your chance of smoking. But that doesn't tell me whether or not there was something to this notion that they had an experience that was supernatural in any sense.
Well, it's not definitive evidence.
It's not evidence at all.
Oh, sure it is. Oh, sure it is.
No.
How is it? Wait a second. Wait a second. That's wrong.
Okay.
It is evidence. So, because look,
no, he's right.
You want to speak,
He's right.
you want to think through this skeptically. Okay, you have a pharmacological substance, it's psilocybin. You give it to people who are trying to quit smoking. The psilocybin doesn't directly have an impact on the smoking behavior. It has to elicit what's described subjectively as a mystical experience. And you can get physiological indicators of that mystical experience. And you might say, well, that's not enough to prove that it's a mystical experience, but you know, you're conscious and I accept that. It's like you accept all sorts of things without being able to demonstrate their validity on every possible objective, with every possible objective criteria. So don't get in too much of a hurry. It's a serious issue. If you give people psilocybin, for example, and they have a mystical experience, not only are they much more likely to quit smoking, which is really something, but they're also much less likely to suffer from death anxiety if they have cancer. Like, that's quite the thing. And not only that, if you test them a year later and they've had a mystical experience, which the majority of them regard as the most significant one, two, or three experiences of their life, including such things as getting married, their personalities are permanently altered in the direction of more openness to experience and more creativity by a standard deviation. Like, that's walloping effects. So we can't get too much in a hurry about dispensing with all that.
Skepticism, as I repeatedly point out in the show, is not about cynicism. It's not about debunking. And I'm not saying that there is no supernatural and that there is no mystical experience. What I'm saying is, the thing that people subjectively describe as, I had an incredibly impactful mystical experience, whether it comes from taking a pharmaceutical, whether it comes from attending a revival church service or hearing a particular preacher, whether it comes from having a particularly impressive sexual experience, all of those things, that is the subjective description of that, which may be because of limitations in language, that they don't have any other. This is the language that infuses culture, so that we have to use that to describe it. But that doesn't in any way serve to confirm that there is any sort of supernatural realm or any sort of supernatural actor.
Well, it depends on how you define supernatural. Like, look, I get your point.
Okay.
And I'm not claiming that the phenomena of psilocybin intoxication is direct proof for the existence of God. I'm not saying that. I am saying,
although that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, people do report personal experiences of that sort of thing. So it's not completely out of the realm of the experience. But it's also because of the problem of the border between the subjective and the objective. It's difficult to probe deeply enough to come up with anything definitive. You know, and I understand that that's a problem. But the supernatural issue, that's a different issue. Like, people are capable of entering different experiential realms where things are qualitatively different to them. The perceptions are different, the thoughts are different, their response to the world is different. They feel that they've died an ego death and transcended their normal mode of perception. Like, maybe that's not part of the supernatural, but then you're starting to define the supernatural pretty narrowly. Like,
no,
do you require miracle, like here and now? Something that defies the laws of physics? Or what's your definition of the supernatural?
So there is the natural world.
Yeah.
And then there are people who make claims that something is not part of the natural world, that it has some external supernatural origin. Those are the claims that I don't see how we can make any sort of epistemologically sound confirmation of. I'm fine with accepting that people have these experiences. I was, for many, many years, fundamentalist Southern Baptist, and I remember standing in church and feeling what I would have described at the time as the Holy Ghost, sweeping through me. Now, many years later, I look back at that and I say, why did I describe this particular experience this way? It's a unique experience. It's of the same quality as something you might experience from a drug, or I've experienced similar things from music and drugs and sex, but they're not all exactly the same. And this is kind of the caveat that the believers, for any one of them, would use is, oh, the thing you're talking about, when you had the awesome sex or you were on drugs, that's not the same as what I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt all of them. The reason I would have said at the time that I had been filled with the Holy Spirit is because everybody around me was saying that too. It's not like I have any sort of any way to demonstrate a causal connection between a Holy Spirit and my experience. It was, I had an experience, and I, like everyone else around me, attributed it to the Holy Spirit.
What was the experience like?
Elation, euphoria. I don't think I ever had visions, but certainly it was an overwhelming sensation. You get the goosebumps or hair on your head. And it was, and I remember fairly distinctly the first time I had a very similar experience outside of church, because it was from listening to secular music that my church would not have allowed. And then I began to look into things, from far more of a psychological perspective of what type of impact specific music has on people. And a friend of mine, we've had conversations about the cadence of particular preachers, because a Southern Baptist minister will have a different cadence than a Pentecostal preacher, and they'll have a different cadence than somebody else, and I won't put on a performance to do them, but we have this intense curiosity as to, are the successful preachers with those cadence in conjunction with the music, are they just tapping into some sort of psychological impact in our brain in order to make us pliable? In the same way that the elevator experiment, where you have everybody face the back of the elevator, and somebody walks in and they face the doors, and after a while, a lot of them become uncomfortable and turn around and face the back with everybody else for no reason. It's just compliance.
Well, you don't want those backward facers to attack you,
It would be good. But if we're back to back, I think, anyway.
Okay, so let me ask you a question about that. Okay, because I think this gets to the heart of some of these issues. So let's say that we can agree that throughout history and before, people were experiencing a set of transcendent emotions that can be evoked by music and dance and other forms of ritual and in a variety of other ways. But there's also a profound proclivity on the part of people, for one reason or another, to attribute those to some sort of supernatural agency.
Yes.
Now, okay, so I want to separate that from another line of thinking, okay? So let's just leave that aside. So we could think of that as a theory about the origin of religious belief. The experience comes first. It comes along with an implicit hypothesis about supernatural actors behind the scenes eliciting these experiences. Okay, that's in marked distinction to other theories of religious derivation, like Freud's theory, for example, that religion is a defense against death anxiety, or Marx's theory that religion is the opiate of the masses. Right? It's a much more biological theory, the one we're putting forward.
Sure.
Okay, and it seems to me to be a much more credible theory, even though religious movements can be harnessed for economic purposes and for purposes of manipulation and all of that, obviously.
Yeah,
so,
I would think that there's any number of explanations I've heard for the origins of religion, and I find almost all of them plausible in different forms, except for the one that asserts that they come directly from a supernatural being.
Well, okay, so that's the one we're gonna pursue, though, because
that was funnier than I thought it was. I was just being honest.
Yeah, well, honesty is often funnier than people think it is.
Boy, don't I know.
So people can have these experiences, and they can be evoked in a variety of ways, and people often find them very valuable, at least in terms of their subjective report.
I agree.
And the psilocybin experiments and also the large-scale analysis of psychedelic drug users, by the way, also indicate that the use of such substances is generally associated with an increment in health rather than a decrement, which is quite interesting, right? It's not something you'd necessarily expect. So here's a question. Why in the world?
Hello, everyone. Wow, it's been such a long time since I stream. I kind of feel like rusty at doing it, but it is what it is. I'm talking to y'all here in my chat, my nice 3 peeps, the people who are always there to support me. I appreciate all of you. Tonight, I'm Gonna talk about some cool things. I'm definitely gonna talk about issues regarding Israel and issues regarding um, different things that I'm thinking about, different ideas that I have. Very just like low key, uncensored, nothing. Maybe watch some YouTube together and talk about it. Also have a guest coming on about 13 minutes, Dr. Thomas Proser. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I think it should be an interesting conversation. I have some cool questions. I was reading through his Substack over here, where the title of one is something called The Rise of Low-Liberalism, which is interesting to me because I think it talks about populism within liberal movements. And that seems very interesting to me. There's also another interesting article of what's driving social justice ideology. And at first, usually rings a bell. I'm like, what do they mean by social justice ideology? But some call this woke. He writes, and he dislikes the term. So interesting to see what his take on this is going to be. And another interesting article I was reading is The Limits of Heterodoxy and his review of the Battle of Ideas. And I think these are going to be some interesting conversations about what's going on and who we're talking to and who we're not talking to. I do have to say to everyone hello as well. I just came off this has been my what first real full week back since vacation. I traveled to Barcelona. I took a transatlantic cruise, went to Cartagena, the Azores, and then on the way back we were supposed to go to Bermuda, but that failed. We never actually went to Bermuda. It was me and a bunch of my friends, which sucks. Always sucks not to go to Bermuda when you think you're going to go to Bermuda. That does suck. I'm still so upset about it. I was really looking forward to going to Bermuda. The YouTube channel is doing very well as well. I think we are at 420. We just hit 420 subscribers. Blaze it. That is, we all love to see that. That is a a fun thing to see. So if anyone's listening, if you have any questions, of course you can ask me. We can talk about it. But let's talk about something that I did experience while I was at Barcelona. I've been reading a lot about like existentialism and a lot about Kierkegaard and his idea of like man of faith versus man of resignation. And yep, 420, cheers. And in his work, man of resignation, man of full faith, I've always encountered that. I think he kind of hits something spot on when it comes to at least like radical types of skepticism, or people who are just never really like fully commit to their beliefs, or they're fallibilist in the worst way. And I find that these people who do this are usually very what's the word? I have Lizzo in my head where she goes like non-committal in one of her songs, but they're non-committal to their political ideas a lot, or like the way in which they should like act in society, or how like a lack of conviction when it comes to like normative things like shoulds. So in like like in how I should live my life, how you should live your life, like there's a real resignation, a lack of commitment that I find frustrating. And one of his analogies in his work is about a ballet dancer who like jumps up and comes back down. And I never really understood that, and I really thought about it. I ended up going to mass. I ended up like pretending to be a Catholic for a day. And it hit me real quick. It wasn't like a difficult thing. It's just when you truly believe in yourself and you actually have a belief in yourself, you actually are able to be like a dancer and dance. And it seemed like it's not difficult. Like this is how everyone does it. Like when you watch a performer play the guitar and it looks like it's easy. Well, that's because they have belief in themselves, trust in themselves. They want to do it. And I feel like a lot of radical skeptics don't do it. Like they don't do it politically, which is why I think that a lot of, socially liberal people who are, maybe it's less today than it was a few years ago, but socially liberal people end up going down like the alt-right pipeline, because I think that pipeline generally preys on you when you don't really like have a true idea of where you want to go or what you want to do, or your ideas aren't informed, or you're not you really don't have as strong convictions as you would like about what is right and what is wrong. Anyhow, yeah, that's kind of what I thought about. Uh, Family wise, people might know that my family is in Israel. They're safe. They're good. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's happy. There's really no issue there, which is nice. Let me see. What else do I have lined up to talk about? I think maybe I started a little too early, but there's always something to talk about. Yeah, exactly, Tart. Z should share my stuff if if you think I should have more subscribers. By the way, Tart, you know me. You're always welcome on the show whenever you want. I mean, I'll send you the link if you ever want to pop in. Um, do I have the ability to pop you in right now? I didn't set up a Patreon. Yeah, but of course, Tart can always pop in. Tart is, for those who don't know, Tart runs his own YouTube channel, and we always do live streams together. He's literally the absolute bomb digs, and there's really like no ifs, ands, or buts about him being the bomb digs. I actually ended up meeting. I ended up going to one of Travis's event, meeting Travis, which was cool because we've been working together for a while. He's been helping us with the YouTube channels, and he's been really supportive of everyone who's trying to do this. And so I met him in person, which was great. Got to have a quick dinner with Lawrence Krauss and Nick Pope. By the way, Lawrence, his brain is just not, there in like a normal way. That guy, he's just literally everywhere at all times, at every place. Oh yeah, your net is still down. It's coming back on Friday though, right? Yeah, so Friday we can start doing streams again. Yeah. Yeah, but Lawrence Krauss's brain is not there. Definitely like hyper successful, either ADHD or something. Like he has found a way to manage that existence, um, which is funny. I really liked your video, Tart. I just thought it needed to be in like landscape, but other than that, it was perfect. Yeah, it is true about Lawrence. Yeah, I know. I know. But Thomas, Professor at Poser, I think, Proser. I don't know exactly to say that. I know he's Polish, but there's one thing that's interesting to me that and I want to ask him as soon as he comes in about that, is about low liberalism. I know Casey remembers if I was we once spoke about like what my issues are with like Bernie, for example, and a lot of it was like populist writings, and I think he connects here somehow low liberalism with populism, um, where he says substantially low liberalism is paradoxical. Though reflecting traditional liberal concerns with freedoms of self-expression, low liberals opposing right populism on these grounds. The ideology has elements which stray from traditional liberalism, and I'm really interesting to understand because I've never heard the term low liberalism before. I really, really haven't, and I wonder like what how he goes about it and understanding it. Right, like low liberals dismiss conservative leaders as dissemblers and damn ordinary conservatives as stupid and or greedy during the right. So it's a type of otherization again, where it's like maybe more traditional liberals just kind of see like the liberal process and try to find value in what everyone says. Yeah, right. So yeah, Tart. So it yet shares a populist tendency to pathologize views of opponents rather than acknowledging like yeah, exactly, rather than acknowledging the preferences of opponents as legitimate. Right? Low liberals dismiss conservatives. During the Brexit debate, this discourse was prominent, and I think this feel the burn, feel the burn. Yeah, okay. So we had a conversation. Do you remember the conversation about the populism? Yeah. Yeah, and he writes more generally, low liberals' inability to understand the limits of politics is concerning, and that's a really interesting line. I think that's the limits of politics is a really interesting line to say here. Let me put that on my notes actually. So it's almost like there's like an argument, maybe a philosophical one, but it's like what are the actual limits of like politics? Is an argument for libertarianism. Which type of libertarianism? He's gonna show in like 3 minutes, Tart. But you can after he shows, you're more than welcome to jump in as always. I'll just VC with you. But the link is EVMux. Can you do an EVMux link with your phone without a video? I mean, as long as you don't turn on your camera, I guess, right? That's cool. Let me invite Tart through the Discords. We'll see what happens. Where's my boy Tartarus? Nice Kierkegaard. Yeah. I've been really liking Kierkegaard a lot, Roski. I've been really, really, really digging Kierkegaard. Evie Cuck, Travis, Evie Cuck. Where's Tartarus? That it is. The first existentialist philosopher, yeah. And I haven't really read too much existentialist philosophers because I don't feel like I'm depressed enough to read existential philosophy. Like I love life, so it's like I never really had an issue with that question about why I ought like life. Like, what's the point? I kind of just like, oh, the point is to enjoy life. Life is fun. Life is good. People are great. So I never really struggled with that question, which I think is a reason why I haven't really read populist, existentialists, not populist philosophers. Fuck. But I one of the things that made me kind of go into it is what I said earlier about people skeptics and consistently engaging like radical skeptics who don't get it, who don't fucking get it. Hey yo, Tart, what's going on? Let me pop you up on screen real quick. Uh, I'll hide you though. No one's gonna be able to see this.
Add on here. So, but I thought I'd chat with you about low liberalism. I've not heard that term before. Can you give me the description again, really quickly?
So he wrote low liberalism. Where is it? So I'm going to ask him about it because I'm super interested in what it is. But he writes, low liberalism, most significant innovations are procedural. Where is it? Let me see. So he kind of says low liberals embrace certain authoritarian and radical left positions. Others may embrace extreme anti-Israel positions. He goes, low liberals' most significant innovations are procedural, many resembling populist tactics and straining liberal democracies. What else does he say? Low liberals don't understand the limits of politics. Oh, he's right here. Professor Presser is right here. It's hard. So we'll
I
continue
will
the
let you have the
conversation later.
conversation. I'll go on mute.
Yeah. How you doing, Professor? Let me put you on screen. Yeah, let me. Yeah, of course. Let me just add you on screen. Give me 1 second. Of course. Okay. There we go. Amazing.
Super.
You're on the screen. Can you see yourself? I'm thinking you
I
should.
can, yeah.
Yeah. You have a laptop? Maybe you can tilt yourself down a little bit or no.
I can't really actually know. I'm so sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. Do not worry about it. It's 1000% fine.
Okay.
So I'm glad to have you on. I mean, one of the reasons why anyhow, I think talking to you when I was offered the chance, because we work with Travis and the whole Pangburn as a whole, and we're streaming on his platform, is the term low liberalism really has like, I've never thought about it this way. I consider myself a liberal. I consider myself on the left, and I used to have conversations with people about specifically why like I don't like. I had issues with Bernie and his populist way of speaking about things. Um, so before we get into that, because that was really rude of me. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. Yeah. I'm looking forward to Christmas here and
Yeah,
just winding down work. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. You're in Poland, right?
No, I'm in Wales in the United Kingdom.
In United Kingdom. Why did I think you were Polish? I don't know.
I've got I used to live in Poland. My wife is Polish. I tweet
Okay.
a lot about Poland, so
Okay.
just
Maybe that's how I confuse the two things. That's all right. But yes, back to the low liberalism question. Can you explain what exactly that is and why it's like different and unique?
Yeah, low liberalism is basically a popular form of liberalism. Of course, liberalism is a long-standing political ideology, which combines belief in personal freedom and belief in the autonomy of the individual, etc. But historically, only really elite elites have thought in organised liberal terms because it's not self-evident. Liberalism is a constructed ideology, as all ideologies are. And one needs to learn how to think in a liberal way, how to realise that the different parts of liberalism go together. And historically, lots of survey data shows that it's elites who've really done this, very, very educated people or political classes or maybe business elites might have thought in these terms. But over the last few decades, there's quite a lot of research that shows this.
Shows what exactly? I'm losing you a little bit. Like,
oh, sorry, no. Have shown that increasingly non-elite, so maybe people who aren't politicians or academics or lawyers, maybe people interested in politics, have begun to really think in liberal terms, but the problem is it tends to be quite crude.
okay.
People might they might say, yeah, I'm a liberal, but they might be very anti-Trump, but they might not quite appreciate exactly what liberalism is, and they might think in highly partisan terms, where they might not really appreciate the nuances. In the United Kingdom, for example, we've had a long-standing debate about Brexit, of course, and lots of what I'd call low liberals supported the second referendum. Now, of course, some elite liberals did, but I'd say that the view was particularly prevalent among low liberals.
So low liberals are basically like not liberalism that comes from the high class or from the elite class,
yeah,
from the lower classes. Okay.
Yeah. Or I'd say sort of the medium classes, maybe people who have got a degree, but because obviously increasingly higher proportions of the population have got degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about 50% now in the UK. I think it's a similar percentage in the US, and so people are increasingly educated. And it's basically people who might have degrees but might not quite understand the nuances. You've seen, I think it's the same in the US, but certainly in the UK, you hear among left liberals an increasing desire to punish and jail opponents. The conviction that Boris Johnson should be jailed for mismanaging the country during Brexit, or similar beliefs. And
I'm thinking about when let's say people wanted specific leaders or media figures to be punished before a due process, like, because traditional liberal ideas are like, we don't judge, we don't hold people guilty until they have due process. Is this like the same thing?
Yes, of course. Of course. I think that belief in due process is really quite a difficult thing to get your head around. You need lots of education. You need really to be socialized into it, and people who don't really understand the kind of the nuances of political ideology, so the so-called low liberals might not understand that due process is important. You saw a bit of that during Me Too as well. Obviously, that was related to people with radical ideologies also, but it was a kind of people who didn't quite understand how liberal democracy and due process and the traditional civil liberties work. They were very ready to say, he has. He looks as if he's done that. He feels bad. Now let's lock him up.
I see. A lot of time, I think that do you think that comes out of a result of a lack of maybe a hiding behind these institutions or these bureaucracies or these liberal governments without recognizing like the social aspect of like these events or these people? So like, oh, we do not treat a person differently entirely socially until they've gone through the due process. But there's a difference between like within the way we behave within a community or the way we behave as a government or as a people, right? Is there no difference between that? And maybe that's where the frustration comes from.
Yeah, and I think generally it reflects how deeply tribal our societies have become, but because increasingly people they just have everything. Our society is just divided into our side and your side, and because of things like the spread of social media. And the divisions of neighborhoods and divisions of workplaces, and there's a real sort of tendency to think that this is how I must think. My side thinks like that. The other side thinks in the opposite way, and and often if you dissent from your side, if you said, for example, during Me Too, well, this person might be accused of that, but you can't lock him up and throw away the key without giving him a trial. It was difficult to do. Also during summer of 2020, it was quite difficult to dissent, and the reason it's difficult to dissent is because our society is so divided. Our societies, are so divided.
So how does low liberalism then exactly maintain the status quo, right? If there seems to be this opposition to like pre-existing, because you write over here that it buttresses the status quo, right? It buttresses. You wrote this in your Substack.
Yeah.
I forgot exactly where you wrote this, but you wrote that it buttresses society, buttresses the
I
status
think
quo.
I was trying to say nice things about it, but because I'm broad. I'd say on the whole, I'm quite skeptical about it. But there are good points, But because I think that it helps maintain liberal democracy. In societies where high proportions of people have got authoritarian or traditionalist values, democracy tends not to thrive. Now we don't really have that problem in the West these days because we have educated populations with liberal values. But so that's one good thing. But on the other hand, it creates problems where if you have liberal majorities or low liberal majorities, however you want to put it, they often can support positions that one might call illiberal. We've seen issues with freedom of speech in universities, for example. That is related to low liberalism. I think as well that the problem is that once you have once low liberalism becomes prevalent, there really becomes a pressure on the traditional liberals to adopt it. With someone like let's say Joe Biden, a sort of a traditional elite liberal, he would, he's all his life he's thought in liberal terms, but if he's got a support base that demands the sort of low liberal, sort of populist policy solutions, and he's under pressure. You're seeing that again and again across the West.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. Low liberalism is a type of liberal attitudes that are born within the lower class, especially because it's a little more educated than it used to be, while not really understanding the scope of what liberalism means,
Yes,
while
exactly.
while simultaneously pushing against other populist right wing rhetorics and creating their own like otherization of them as a it's like, as a it's is it in part created by the rise of populism on the right, or is
Yes,
it
of course. Yeah, I maybe if we just talk about low liberalism, we're giving the right a bit of an easy ride here. Of course, I'm a bit of a centrist, and I think of course, there are very serious problems on the right, particularly in the United States. And yes, they're playing off against one another, because well, you see it all the time on Twitter, where yeah, the one of the sides.
X? I gotta correct you. It's X now.
Sorry,
It's
X.
not
Yeah,
Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore. It's X.
I'll never get used to that. Well, anyway, on X, where one of the sides, will do something. It might be Matt Walsh or whoever, or Ben Shapiro or one of the politicians, and that creates sort of a counter reaction from the liberal side, and and absolutely, I'd say that someone like Matt Walsh is a low conservative. If
Okay.
you can use the term, and of course it's a big problem for democracy, because as well, what research shows is that historically, most people didn't really think ideologically. Of course, they had preferred parties. They would have identified with the Republicans or Democrats or the Labour or the Conservatives in the UK, but they didn't just think in this deeply ideological way where everything was sort of coded into either a liberal or conservative category. And it's a big problem for
So
democracy.
was this partisanship? Was there, because we know that similar to the 1920s and the beginning of the 19th century, there was a rise of fascism throughout Europe and the United States, right?
Yeah.
Was the partisanship similar to how it is now, or now is it unique? As you're saying, people are thinking much more ideologically, or was that different then than it
Yeah,
is now?
they're certainly different. Of course, the fascism of the interwar decades was far more extreme than anything there is now. But on the other hand, I would say that maybe it makes sense if we just talk about the UK and the US, but because it's a bit difficult to compare to dictatorships. But certainly in the UK and the US, you didn't have such a deep level of tribalization throughout the population. People might have identified with certain political parties, and there might have been various resentments against certain groups. But I wouldn't have said that it was so in your face and sort of organized that when you that you were confronted with these divisions all the time, and you brought them into work, and you observed them in sports, for example. That's or you thought of firms, of businesses.
So like, even though fascism it wasn't a part of sports, was it really not a part of sports? I thought it was a part of sports, like
Sorry,
in the early
yeah, of
1900s.
course. I'd say yeah. Well, of course, in the UK and the US, fascism fortunately, never came into power. But I'd say probably in the countries where it did come to power, I'd say it was more of a top-down process. It was imposed by the government, of course. Yes, they tried to politicize everything they could.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more of a kind of a bottom-up process.
Okay. So fascism in the US and the UK, you say, when it did show up its face, it came from like low conservatism, it didn't, or like low liberalism, it didn't come from elite, right? You say it was different. I'm trying to follow along.
Yeah, there were never, of course, there were never actual fascist regimes in the UK and the US,
Correct.
of course, but but in countries like Germany and Italy, I'd say that of course the fascist government tried to impose ideology upon society and the population. It was very much a top-down thing. Now, in the UK and the US today, of course, people might not be so extreme. The ideology might not be so extreme, but it's kind of more diffused throughout the population, where people have kind of internalized the different, the differences between liberals and conservatives, and they think in terms of ideological difference. They think, that's
Okay.
celebrity. Do
Okay.
you see?
It's almost like a McCarthyism 2.0, where everyone's involved in like McCarthy's project. Like, have you ever been a socialist? Are you conservative? Did you talk with Trump? Did you agree with this? Were you on this panel? And kind of like just a straight up division based on like that, but it's permeating throughout all of society is what we're
Yeah,
seeing
yes,
now.
of course, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So you so in another substack you wrote about social justice ideology, and you said that some call it woke, but you dislike that term.
Yeah.
I kind of dislike both of those terms. So can you explain to me what you mean by social justice ideology?
With social justice ideology, yeah. Let's start with the term woke. I mainly dislike it because it's pejorative. I don't think that it helps to have pejorative terms, but because it alienates opponents, and it impedes dialogue. But of course, on the left, if you like, over the last 10 years or so, a new ideology has emerged. It emphasizes identity politics. It emphasizes emotional safety. There is a threat to freedom of speech. Subsequently, there is an emphasis upon direct action. We saw in the summer of 2020 there was a willingness to defend crowds pulling statues down. And that is really, as many people have pointed out, there's a real conflict with liberalism. And I think that social justice ideology is a more neutral term than woke. Of course, one can call it progressivism. I think lots of people, particularly in the US, favour that term. But the problem with progressivism is it's not really time and place specific. There have been many progressive ideologies in the past, and with social justice ideology, it's a labour where you can just say, if you talk about social justice ideology, it means this ideology that's taken hold in the
Okay.
West, 20th century.
But this is where I get a little confused, and maybe I want to push back a little bit here. I think when they justify taking down statues, or when you start seeing like these social justice movements, um, kind of say, you know, something, yeah, we're not going to use these government measures. Doesn't that come because it's not because they don't understand the limits of government, but rather what government does no longer serves the purposes that people need it to serve. Like, why think, like, so where does it come from if it doesn't come from a either resentment or a reaction to the fact that government seems to not be working, and in a way they're looking for some type of social accountability, right? We once again find that term, just like there was a lot of frustration about the fact that, you know, government was not taking down statues of Confederate soldiers and Confederate generals in the United States. That was a rebellion that was put up by former slave owners who wanted to entrench the right to keep blacks as slaves. So is the justification of, oh, they can't rip down those statues? Well, is it only there because it's not legal, But what about the other
Well,
idea of where the government just is not doing what it needs to do? It's being held back. Liberal
well, of
values are being
course,
held back through bureaucracy or whatever it is.
yeah, well, of course. Look, people have got the right, and will always be upset with the government, and they might rightly also object to there being certain statutes. But I think what the Liberal does is they organise through legal means. They petition the government or the council or whatever, and they go to the meetings, they sign petitions, they might have peaceful protests, and they achieve the removal of the statute through democratic means, so sort of orderly, legalistic means. Now, people might say that doesn't work, but once they start pulling down statues just unilaterally without the permission of the government, that isn't liberalism.
So what is that?
Well, it is. Obviously, there are many ideological movements that pull down statues, but in terms of what we've seen on the left, in the last few years, I think that social justice ideology is a very good term.
So so is it more anarchy? Do you think it's much more closer to anarchism than it is to
Yes, it certainly it's got elements of that. I'd say that as an ideology, social justice ideology, it has elements of liberalism. Clearly, it has elements of Marxism. It has elements of anarchism, and of course there were many anarchists, Marxists, and indeed liberals or people who called themselves liberals who supported the unilateral removal of statues from 2020. But I think that when you group together the various strands, social justice ideology is the most fitting term.
I see why you're using the term social justice. You're kind of saying, well, these low liberals aren't really liberals because they're going against like liberal values of working through your government. So, and this is why you say low liberalism is paradoxical.
Yeah,
Because
I'd say it's not. There's certainly an overlap between low liberalism and social justice ideology, but they're ultimately slightly different things.
okay, what's the distinction?
Well, social justice ideology is an ideology, and many elites hold it, and there are academics who favour social justice ideology, and they write about it and they think about it in organised terms. Whereas low liberalism, it certainly includes elements of social justice ideology, but I'd say it's more a sort of non-elite ideology, where people, where non-elites are thinking in quite crude terms, and they might be putting together elements of liberalism and elements of social justice ideology, even elements of authoritarianism or conservatism and populism. So I'd
So
say
is low liberalism a reactionary movement? Is what you're saying?
no. I'm not saying
No.
that.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Because usually for me, like populism and authoritarianism or like these elements come out as a reaction to something, like feeling like you're losing control in society, or am I completely off
It's
base?
related. I guess I say it's not reactionary, but because the term reactionary evokes the right and conservatism or fascism. But of course it's a reaction to
Yeah, that's what I meant.
certain things, of course. Yeah.
So whereas more where instead of being grounded in academia, it's a crude way in which this population is reacting to what's going on in like this real time under the
Yes,
auspices of
exactly.
liberalism because it's currently maintaining the status quo.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. Okay.
Thank you.
You recently said that this was October. You went to the Battle of Ideas.
Yeah.
Um, and I saw that people there like Peter Boghossian spoke there, and my own like history with Peter Boghossian. I don't know if you know this. I grew up Orthodox Jewish. I was Jewish for religious my whole life, and then when I became an atheist, in a way, I kind of Peter
Hmm.
Boghossian wrote a book called Manual to Creating Atheists,
Hmm.
and that's kind of when I first heard about him. I- and I kind of had like a weird like first I liked him a lot, and then I saw his work on either trying to entrap academics or his work with people who very much denounce contemporary psychological like data on gender and stuff like that. What is
Yeah.
what was your experience with that group, and where do you find like they have issues, or where they're hitting a point that liberals don't recognize that they're giving good criticism to?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring this in now, but because I guess I'm the typical person who's not a member of any gang, a bit of a kind of
Mhm.
an individualist. There are lots of us who really refuse to join a particular tribe. Yeah, but yeah, I would say that over the last 5 years, there's been the formation of a kind of a counter-intellectual culture. Some people might call it the intellectual dark web, of people who are quite upset about the direction of liberalism and the left, and of course I to some extent share those frustrations. But I think that what we've seen in the last few years is really that there's quite a significant set of problems with that movement. I wrote, I went to the Battle of Ideas in October. It's a British event, and the
Mhm.
vast majority of the speakers there are British. You've got you had other famous British speakers like Matthew Goodwin and Graham Linehan and Claire Fox. Aside, of course, from Peter Boghossian, I didn't meet him or hear him, but
Mm.
lots of similar people like that. And I'm very interested in hearing from such people. But what I wrote about in the in the blog post was that I think there's a sort of an echo chamber forming on that, in that group now. They have their own, their own events, and they have their own websites and their own books. And what's quite curious is that this event is called a Battle of Ideas, but on all the panels, people really seem to agree, or at least all the panels I went to. And I think I really do get it quite exasperated sometimes when I read the intellectual dark web, wherever, but because I find that often people can be quite, certain people, not everyone, can be quite intolerant of left liberal point of view. There's a willingness to dismiss left
Mm.
liberal views, and some of them are extremely important.
Specifically academic views as well. I feel like
Yes,
there's such
definitely.
a conspiracy around academia coming from academics as well who are in that field.
Yeah, exactly. And but because, for example, I was reading, I was just this week actually discussing reaction to the congressional hearing, with the three presidents, like the infamous hearing, that
Mhm.
everyone's talking about with the three Ivy League presidents. And of course, I was pretty horrified at the hearing. I thought it was, I
Yeah.
couldn't believe what I was seeing. But
I mean, talk about the thing that made me frustrated with the left.
yeah,
I was actually quite extremely shocked that after October 7th, I saw protests in favor of what was happening, saying this is what liberation looks like. Like I was absolutely shocked. I grew
yeah,
up
it's
in Israel.
dreadful.
I could not
Yeah.
believe that people who I considered on my side politically were willing to advocate for that. I was
I know
completely
it's
shocked.
shocking, but unfortunately, many of us weren't surprised. But I think where I don't exactly agree with the intellectual dark web is that lots of people will say everyone in university is like that. Every professor is a massively woke Marxist, and that's just not the reality. Of course, as you were saying, we've got certain problems with extreme ideas in academia, but you've really got to be very careful. And academia is an extremely diverse sector, and in certain
and
departments.
it's actually very self-correcting, and historically has been very good against political ideologies. This is why generally, like, right fascistic movements or authoritarian movements, first thing they specifically target universities. Like
Yes,
the
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
they're usually very resistant to that type of pressure in the way they're set
Yeah,
up.
exactly. There's as you say, there's lots of scope for self correction. Lots of academics are very independent minded. And if you say if people say all academics are woke or the vast majority, or that's just not true. But because there's lots of dissent towards these ideas. The political views of academics are, of course, they're broadly liberal, but they can be quite diverse in that you get lots of people who aren't exactly happy with developments on the left. But particularly in the United Kingdom, I think obviously I don't. I'm not so familiar with American academia, but I'd say
I mean, they're
beware
very
before you.
similar, right? I mean, accreditation is pretty much the
Yeah,
same. They have
yeah, of course
transfer
they're similar.
professors.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
they're similar. So the same point is important. I think you've really got to beware before you but before you sort of characterize a whole sector.
it's I find that a lot of the times in these groups that we talk about, like the dark web, or whether it was, the AM radio craze, like in the 80s and 90s and 70s, right wingers were able to like say, "Oh, we're censoring FM radio, go on AM radio," or like we're good like 2014, 2013, when the internet started, like the politics on the internet really started becoming a thing. And it's usually motivated by, they say it's motivated by free speech.
Yeah.
Isn't it sometimes also motivated from the fact that people are just getting criticized? Like, how much of it do you think is actually motivated out of feeling like censored, or simply out of feeling like shamed or not accepted?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that historically, free speech is a left wing or a left liberal demand broadly, but because left liberals have tended to be minorities in traditional societies. They might have been very religious societies or societies where there were low levels of education. It meant that people who thought in liberal terms faced social pressure. Now that has changed, as we were saying earlier, because we have high proportions of educated citizens.
I see.
Liberal views or low liberal views have become far more prevalent, and so conservatives are facing pressure.
So it's
Um,
not so it's so advocacy for free speech is not a liberal conservative thing, it's a majority minority split. Where the majority
well,
tends to not advocate for it and the minority tends to advocate for it, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
I'd say that's mainly it. That's the main thing. For example, if we go back to the 17th century, in the wars of religion, the fight over religion, Catholics in England wanted free speech because they were a minority. Catholics in France didn't want free speech. Quite the opposite, because they were a majority and they had the king
Hmm.
on their side. So yeah, I would say that's the primary driver. Although
Is
of course,
so is
ideology is
because
relevant.
what I found interesting is, before our current events and what we just spoke about, the panel that spoke in front of Congress from MIT, Harvard, and Penn, I believe, there was a real clear like thing. Oh, you can't protest for the destruction of black people on campus. You can't go ahead and bring in speakers that are anti-trans or anti-queer, anti-gay onto campus. But all of a sudden, after the events of October 7th, when you start seeing these protests calling for the genocide of Jews, all of a sudden that was within the realm of free speech.
Yeah, it's tremendously.
But
Sorry.
what's interesting to me here is that conservatives and Jews who are advocating for are still the minority in this country. Why is it that where's the politics here? Like I'm losing the politics. I'm losing how the ideology remains consistent across these lines.
Well, obviously, politics and society is quite messy, and unexpected things can come on the table. And of course, you're right. In the last few months, there have been very legitimate concerns about anti-Semitism in Western universities, and I've been very interested, but because to some extent the conservatives have flipped where they're now emphasizing the need for safety
for
of
safety and censorship on
Jewish
campus.
students.
Exactly.
Yeah, and censorship, and of course, some people are being two-faced about it. And a number of prominent conservatives. There was a good Andrew Sullivan column a few weeks ago where he was talking about this and criticizing some people for being two-faced, and that's exactly what's happened. Where they're using free speech as a kind of a weapon in the culture war. But I think the really important thing to do, I'm involved in campaigns for free speech in universities in the UK, and I think the really important thing is to be consistent. I think the problem that many of us have with universities is that they've emphasized microaggressions over the last few years for certain groups of students.
I mean, but
certain
can we liken microaggressions to calling, I don't know, for the segregation of black people? Let's say someone comes on campus, says, "I'm advocating." A group says, "We're advocating for lynching and segregating and making black people slaves again." I think that's absolutely not okay. There's no
No, of course
free
it's
speech
not.
here.
No.
There's no free speech here, right?
No, of course it's not okay. Because that might be someone invoking violence, and of course that's not okay. No serious free speech advocate has ever said that you can say what you want. But I think the key thing is to achieve consistency. The problem. There was a good John Haidt tweet actually. Sorry, not tweet, post on X this week where he said, that we should be consistent, and at the moment, the problem that many of us have with university administrators is they're inconsistent. They are willing to tolerate very, very extreme calls against Jewish people or Israel, and under the umbrella of free speech, but they take very very strict positions against other groups.
Just to get your a position on this, because there's someone in the chat who's talking about stopping the genocide, asking to stop violence against an entire city, and I recognize that protests about that are entirely welcome.
Oh yes, of course,
and should be welcomed. But the issue is, it's not about that. That's not what people have issue with. The issue is with everything else to do with it, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. It look, I personally got a sort of a centrist view on Israel-Palestine conflict, but I do strongly believe that people should be able to articulate, very partisan positions on the conflict. It's very important. It's very important that people can criticize the Israeli government in the strongest terms. And lots, but because of the nature of the conflict and sensitivities around anti-Semitism. Of course, critics of Israel are going to be accused sometimes of anti-Semitism, and I agree that a sort of an accusation of anti-Semitism should not automatically shut down debate.
Agreed.
But as I was saying, it's really got to be the same across the board. I think the big problem is that universities have for certain, following 2020. And Black Lives Matter, they were adopting policies on race that were really quite extremely rigorous. And that left little room for freedom of speech. Now, and of course,
Like, what's an example of one?
well, where you have where you have HR policies, for example, that say things asking where you're from is an example of a microaggression, which I wouldn't personally accept. Or you have there was an example in the UK also of a policy that said that you couldn't explain difference in outcome with reference to cultural factors, which is really quite worrying. But because lots of academic research is based on identifying differences between cultures and explaining different outcomes, whether that's employment or crime or educational achievement with reference to culture. And
I mean,
yeah.
Okay, interesting, because I recently interviewed Cornel West on my show, and I had his book Race Matters, and in my go, yeah, of course it does. Where you come from, your ethnicity, where you grew up, all of that matters when we're talking about people. We're meeting people as academics who want to do research, right? If you want to full request a government or full request a public institution for their information about their students, which students had these GPAs, what their ethnicity, you can't do that research without asking that. But do you
No,
think
of
that?
course you can't.
But do you think that they're talking about it's a microaggression to ask someone where they're from? If, like, let's say, you and I come into a room, right? But there's one black person in the room, but everyone kind of looks at them and goes, "Where are you from?" In a way that's like saying, "Oh, you're obviously an other." Do you see how that could be, from an HR
of
perspective, an
course,
actual type of subtle, under the table aggression that
of
makes them
course.
feel alienated?
Don't get me wrong. I can see certainly how someone could use that aggressively, to sort of make how a racist might use it aggressively. But the issue that some of us have with these policies is that often they're applied across the board, and in the majority of cases in the university, asking someone where they're from would be an entirely innocent question. But I think you're right. You've really got to distinguish between HR policies and EDI policies, and policies on academic freedom. But because I think with academic freedom, it's extremely important that I think administrators get off the backs of academics. But because academic research, it produces very upsetting results often. And we've got to give freedom to people to pose controversial hypotheses, because that's how that's how academia develops. No, but yeah, point taken. With HR policies,
Yeah, with an HR
and
policy, it makes sense,
yeah,
right? Human
yeah,
resources, you work at the place, it's a workplace. But just like as a social thing, with people,
I'm
there's a
just
difference
thinking
there.
now. If like, let's say if you were in a university and you were sending your co-workers all the time research on different intelligence rates or whatever that made the argument there were different intelligence intelligence between races, and you were sending that to your co-workers, of course that's not unacceptable, because it's you'd be targeting
Yeah, I mean, it's
people.
also it's also a science that's, at this point, the priors just show that race would never be a thing that makes intelligence change. Not itself biologically. Maybe you'll find, like, you can. It is true that African Americans in the U.S. end up scoring worse on standardized tests, but it's not
Yeah.
because they're black. It's because of other factors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not familiar enough with the research. Obviously, it's extremely
That's fine.
controversial. Yeah.
It is controversial for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Yeah. I one last thing because I don't want to hold you for too long. We're getting towards the end of the session. We told you about an hour max.
Yeah.
Um,
Great for me.
what is like right other than the things that I read? What are the things that are sitting in front of your head? Like, what are your passions right now? What are you working on? What is like an idea that because you said you love paradoxes. I also love paradoxes. I always tell viewers and people that I talk to, I have a minor in philosophy, a degree in psychology. I say I love paradoxes. I think paradoxes tell us where we're at the edge of our understanding. What is like where you're at the edge of your understanding? What are the new things that you're discovering or learning?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a book at the moment. We're looking at social justice ideology that I was talking about it earlier, and really, I would say that I've got a problem with the existing research, but because that there are books by authors like Richard Hanania and
Okay.
Yasha Monk. Yeah, they're interesting books, but I would say that they don't really use statistics. They oft tend to make the argument without really looking at things in great depth, and I'm really passionate about sort of shining a more empirical light on this debate, but because I think that this debate it's reached a bit of a stalemate, and there are lots of academics, well, maybe not lots, but there are certainly academics I know who are really interested in looking at questions related to social justice ideology. From from an angle it's more informed by statistics and public opinion data, and not being so partisan about it either. But because, as I was saying earlier, I think that society is very tribal, and also that there's been a tendency on the intellectual
Mm,
dark web to think in terms of my team, your team, and
I see.
yeah, yeah.
So you're trying to just take a much more empirical analysis of what people call social justice ideology, or what we just discussed earlier as wokeism and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wokeism, because it's a bad term anyhow. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. We're trying to look at it from that point of view. Yeah.
sounds great. Well, where can people find you? Where can people meet you? And I know you have a
I'm
Substack,
on.
which is great. So
Yeah, I'm on. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Sorry, I said Twitter again. I will. It's so difficult. I'm too old to.
I still. By the way, it's still twitter.com for anyone who wants. It's not
Yeah. Oh, there
x.com.
we are. Then I'm
It's
on.
still twitter.com. So you can. It's
I'm
okay.
on. Well, there we are. So you'll allow me to say I'm on twitter.com at ProsserTJ. And I've got a Substack, the Path Not Taken, and I love getting subscribers. So please subscribe to my Substack, and it's all free. I try and write as often as I can. I'm very busy with work and family and everything, but it's
Mhm.
it's all free, and yeah, and I just try and push ideas around, and hopefully in the next year or two my book will be coming out. So yeah.
I mean, amazing. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming on, and thank you
Oh
for
no, it was my
having a
pleasure. It
great.
was wonderful to talk with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, great.
That was a fun conversation. Interesting, very interesting guy. Very to the facts. What is going on? What is not going on? I enjoyed speaking with him. I did push back a little bit on notions of wokeism and social justice ideology, but I understand what he's at least saying and how he's defining it, which is interesting. I didn't under I do now understand low liberalism as, liberalism, which is usually found within the lower class of society. Makes much more sense than before. And now I'm starting to think about, well, we have high conservatism and low conservatism. That's an interesting dichotomy to present. I do truly think. I see Her Highness here, saying there isn't calls for genocide of Jews on any college campuses. I wonder how true that is. And maybe we should look that up real quick and see, is there or have there been calls for genocide on college campuses? I mean, I would say that, intifada, revolution, from the river to the sea, altogether calls for genocide. In the same way that I think, if Israelis would say, from the river to the sea, Israel is the only flag you'll see, right? I think that's also a call for genocide. I would wonder if you would agree or not. Um, if Jews were chanting that in the West Bank or in Jerusalem, I think they're calling for a type of ethnic cleansing and genocide. I think if they're calling people, derogatory names like Jew, kike, using it in a derogatory way, I think that altogether that lets us know that they're calling for genocide. And I think it's a little naive to think that there were no calls for genocide on college campuses. I also think, as liberals, I'm a liberal myself, as leftists, we need to listen to the voices of minorities, to the experiences of minorities. And Jews in these are still the minorities on these campuses. Jews are still the minority on the planet. 1000% they are. It's important to understand that. Um, it is important to understand that, whether they're backed or not. But you do admit that no one said kill all Jews. Sure. Just like I admit that people can be racist and call for, the enslavement of black people without saying all black people are monkeys or kill all black people. Yeah, for sure. That's not an issue. That's why calls for genocide and dog whistles are very important to pay attention to, right? They're not explicit. People aren't dumb. Modern forms of bigotry, modern forms of hatred are not communicated in blatant terms. Populations are cleaner, they're more sophisticated, we're more educated, more interconnected linguistically, and there's much more of a higher price to be paid if you're explicitly racist in ways that resemble, or explicitly genocidal in ways that resemble, the mid to early 19th century. No, I don't think I'm misrepresenting the students in the same way that when someone says, trans ideology must be banned or trans ideology must be eradicated, right? We remember Michael Knowles saying that in front of Congress, right? Are we misrepresenting him when we say Michael Knowles is kind of calling for the genocide of trans people? I don't think we're misrepresenting him. I think it's exactly what he's calling for. He's calling to make sure there's no such thing as a trans person. It needs to just end. Transness needs to disappear. Are we misrepresenting him? Are we misrepresenting the students? Not necessarily. Calling for intifada, saying there's only one solution, rid the world of Jews. I think that's pretty. Holding signs that say, throw Jews in a trash can with or clean the world of blank. Israeli signs, garbage. Yeah, that's bordering the line. Intifada revolution. There's only one solution. These are dog whistles. These are very clear to pick up. And to ignore that is to give people a credence. Now, there's two options. Either you're extremely uncritical with what you have to say. No. How about this? How about we just stream? We just stream. We find exactly what it is. Let's do it. Let's go ahead and find exactly videos of this happening. And then we don't have to argue about it, right? That's how simple that works. Just pull up videos, read some articles, figure out exactly what's happening, and then there's no more argument left to be made. And then that should be good, shouldn't it? I think so. Right? It's an easy way to do it. So when we talk about intifada, right, this is where we start obfuscating by becoming too specific, right? It's like saying black on black crime or saying 1350 is not racist. I'm not being racist. I don't think black people are less than white people. Let's slow down and think about the context. Think about the rhetoric. Think of what people are actually saying as opposed to not saying, right? For example, if we say, there is a genocide happening in Israel, right? There's a genocide happening. Scholars claim there's a genocide. Could very well be a genocide from what the scholars have to say. It's also entirely different than what happened in 1940, right? Just like I can be a murderer if I get into a fight with someone on the street and kill them by knocking them out. And I can also be a murderer if I stalked you for 2 weeks and then shot you in the face during the opportune moment. Both places of murdering They're also two very different things. I can outwardly call for your genocide, right? I can outwardly call for the genocide of someone, or I can be slick about it. All of these things can happen. It's important to understand, right? That's very important to understand the difference between the two. We can read in between the lines. That's what makes us good. But hey, let's actually just look it up. There's no need to not do that. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we can just look it up together rather than playing these games where we're not doing so. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and search this together. Let's do this. Cabbage is bland. Best comment ever. First of all, if your cabbage is bland, it's because you don't know how to cook cabbage. But that's besides the point entirely. So let's see. Protests on campus, Israel. I don't know. What we get. Here, this is November 17th. So it's about a month ago. Let's see what it says. Let's start with this video and then move on. Because they do say that even if you did call the genocide, it wouldn't be an issue. But it's a U.S. campus protest. It's November 4th. Can we get something a little more modern? Something a little better? Protest on campus. Genocide? What if we just, play the field? Let's go towards the bias. Let's see. It's October 3rd. Harvard fixates on safe spaces while ignores college president under fire for dodging questions. Student posted in principle. Let's see what's happening here. What website? CBS News. Sure. Let's see our bias CBS News. So students protest University of Pennsylvania. Go away. I'm not interested in listening to you talk. Any links of any videos of any protest? No, not really. Okay, this is boring. This is not what we're looking for. If you're going to consistently simply say, did they say genocide all the Jews? Then you are missing the context of what people say. For example, in Australia, Sydney, they said gas the Jews, gas the Jews. They didn't say kill all the Jews. They did not say genocide the Jews. That's normal, right? That's fine. Right? For example, Michael Knowles did not say genocide trans people. He said eradicate transgenderism. That's not the same thing, right? So let's go ahead and try to actually think about this critically. When we talk about calls for genocide or calls for violence against specific groups of people, what do those look like? They're not going to be explicit, right? They're not going to be explicit. And to ask to show the specifics is dishonest because once again, I'm not claiming that they said it. They might have said this, but people are usually smart, especially in front of a camera. So let's look this up. Why am I the only one who's crazy? Why is it not actually showing what I'm searching up? Interesting. Remove from scene. Yes. Okay. What's happening here? If I share this, okay, add this to the scene. What in the world is happening? Okay, this is the problem. I'm gonna fix this real quick. What in the world is happening? Give me 1 second while I fix this. Here, you get to look at my beautiful face while I fix this. Give me a second. Let me see. Where's my face, though? Okay, my face should be above that. It should be right there. Aha, okay. Da-na-na. Yeah, I know. That's better. Okay. So Casey, yeah, I agree with you that from the river to the sea just by itself is absolutely not, you know, just on its face anti-Semitic. It can be, just like 1350 doesn't really make you a racist. It can be, right? Or just like, for example, having difficulty with your attention doesn't mean you have ADHD, but having difficulty with your attention plus a bunch of other symptoms can make us diagnose, hey, you might have ADHD, right? So I'm not talking in absolutes, right? The only absolute way to know whether someone wants to actually like genocide Jews or re-enslave black people or eradicate and murder trans people is to have them say, I want to eradicate and murder trans people. I want to genocide Jewish people. I want to be racist, yada, yada, yada. But dog whistles matter. Rhetoric matters. Everything around it matters a lot, right? So when you talk about intifada, which is revolution specifically during the first or second intifada, which were attacks against Jewish civilians, right? That's what intifada was in Israel. You say it's the only solution, and you put an emphasis on solution, right? People are chanting other things like from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's not just talking about, and then when you further ask specific groups, well, what do you mean Palestine? Say, well, Israel, they're all colonizers. You have to get kicked out of there. The painting starts to materialize itself. And you start seeing that not all of the people, but a lot of the people in these groups who, at the same time, they also say that it was harrowing behavior of what the October 7th Hamas militants did. Liberation fighters. All of that together, I think, makes it very clear what's happening. It's anti-Semitism. It's calling to kill Jews and eradicate them from an area. This is, if we can consider statements from the Israeli Knesset like, you know, remove Palestinians or from the river to the sea, Israel's the only flag you'll see, and we can reconsider that calls for genocide, which articles have posts to do. We can recognize that on the other side as well. We have to be even here. We have to be recognize that there is a bunch of anti-Semitism underlying this entire behavior. I don't know why you're saying free Palestine is anti-Semitic. I don't think free Palestine is anti-Semitic. So yeah, but let's get YouTube up. Let's actually get YouTube up. Let me do it properly. So here we go. Okay, now it's working. A chant used at anti-Israel protests on 2 colleges. Let's see what's this. The APs. I say, yeah, but you don't see when I switch it to the AP. That's so interesting. That's super interesting. What if I just stream the application window? Ah, that's better. Okay, but then you get to see all those different. That's not what I want. That's not good. No bueno. Okay, that looks better, but I still think the dimensions are wrong. Whatever. So let's see what's going on here. Claim pro-Palestinian rally UCLA Penn State calling for Jewish genocide. AP's assessment is false. The chant uttered during recent demonstrations is being misrepresented. Protesters aren't saying we want Jewish genocide, but Israel, we charge you with. Oh yeah, I remember this one. Yeah. That was true. That specific thing was false, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something else. Okay. So that's Jewish students saying that they didn't like the Jewish feeling of Jewish hate. Why am I getting this? You cannot be gay and be a Christian. Okay, yeah, I don't care about Candace Owens. She's an idiot. Misquoted. Protesters actually chanting Israel, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Okay, that's fine. Okay, fine. That's true. They did not explicitly say genocide. I remember this. This is not what I'm talking about. That's still not my argument. And I think to fairly understand my argument, that's not what I'm saying. So, no, Hair Highness, this is becoming a trend with you. It really is. I say X, you claim I say Z, and then you argue for Z. I would urge you to write in the comment section what my actual argument is, because I think that that's not my argument. Okay, my argument is very clear. that anti-Semitism and genocide can be stated without explicitly calling for it. If we're going to look for explicitly calling for genocide or explicit racism, we're not going to be able to actually see it. We're not going to be able to actually recognize it. In the same way that Michael Knowles has never explicitly called for trans genocide. But yet I know that most liberals and most leftists think he does, and I do as well believe that Michael Knowles explicitly, not explicitly, at least implicitly, and with his words, wants a trans genocide. So let's see. Okay, so how about we do this? Let's look at chants for Intifada on college campus. Let's see what's happening over here. I hate Google. Google is the worst. I want to use my DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is elite and infinitely better. Wow, it's actually worse. I can't believe it's actually worse. What happened to my camera? Excuse me, that's the wrong angle. Thank you very much, except the colors are wrong now. There we go. Fixed. Correct. So this is what I'm trying to say. I can't. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself. Can someone in the chat help me? Many things contribute to the opinion that someone could be advocating for genocide, right? Just like the IDF and Israel's Knesset as a whole said, we are not at war with the Palestinians. We are at war with Hamas. We do not want to kill the Palestinians. Does that mean that there is no intention for genocide? I mean, I think you would disagree knowing your positions from our other conversations, right? If you're not going to find an explicit call. That's not going to happen in today's politics. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to be able to read in between the lines like an educated person. You're going to have to look at a piece of literature or someone's rhetoric to figure out what they're really thinking. This is what I'm trying to show here. This is where I'm researching. I'm trying to build the evidence. What are the specific factors that I'm talking about? I mean, it's not in denial that they chant Intifada, right? I just want to find a video. I think it'd be fun. It's not in denial that they chant something like they say, oh, these were liberation fighters and we applaud what they did. That seems like agreeing with the aims of Hamas, which are explicitly genocidal. So there's a few things here to talk about. I'm just trying to find the right article because I don't want something mirrored by the garbage of the last week's political hearings. So then how do you know if students are using it to call for genocide of Jews? Very good question. How do we know? We look at a few factors. I would say that one thing we look for is we look at attitudes about what happened on October 7th. Some people go, what happened on October 7th is terrible, and they chant Free Palestine. I don't think they're genocidal, right? And they say, no, I have no issue with Jews. I don't think they're genocidal. That's fine. But I look for about three things, right? This is my take. I look for three things. The first thing I look for is, do you call Hamas fighters liberation fighters and believe that any Israeli is a settler and colonizer, and every Israeli is a military, therefore they're a legitimate target? You do that, that's 1 point out of the total 3 necessary for me thinking that you want genocide of Jews. Okay? That's one thing. Second point, if you start chanting on college campuses, right, Intifada revolution, it's the only solution, and you keep doing that over and over and over again, that's another indication that you're a little bit genocidal here, right? Third one, and most importantly one, you believe that Jewish people are white. You call them European colonizers. Not recognizing that only about 30% of Jewish people in Israel are white European descendant. We have Mizrahi descendant, Yemenite descendants, right? Descendants from Iraq and Syria. I mean, my own grandfather, 8th generations lived in Israel. No European descent there. When you do all of these three things combined, you are definitely A, an anti-Semite, and B, calling for the genocide of Jews in Israeli specifically. There's no question in my mind. That's my take. I'm not making shit up right now. That's exactly my take. I mean, the all caps. It's just more indication of unhingedness. Really got to relax with that, you know. But these are my takes. This is how I see the issue. You don't like it, you don't like it. But I've been very clear about it. But what thing we can definitely agree on is that Jewish students don't feel safe on campus. Is that for no reason at all? Might be for no reason at all. Depends on what you think. But let's see. Let's go to YouTube. What if we look up college campus right account? No, this is the other alt account that I just made. There we go. This is the account we're looking for. Aha. College campus anti-Israel protest. Let's see. Oh, Scott is getting me. Let's see. Let's see what are some of the chants that were going on. Okay. Let's watch this propaganda real quick from NBC. Oh, there was a great video about this that I just saw not too long ago. Oh my God, where is it? This is the problem with videos. Just lose them, you see them, you lose them. What was a specific one where they went into like a pro-Palestinian meeting? Can never find anything anymore online. Well, let's start with this. Calling this is college campus at Harvard. Going around a Jew and yelling shame on them for the actions of Israel is what we know it's anti-Semitism. Why is it anti-Semitism? Because being Jewish doesn't mean you're Israeli, nor you have anything to do with the actions of Israel. That is once again a type of new anti-Semitism, where discrimination, hatred of Jews is justified by anti-Israel sentiments. Okay, here's one example of that happening. That definitely happened. Let's see what else we got. We're gonna keep going down. We're gonna keep going down the line. Let's see. Ooh, how about the ripping down of posters? That's a good one. Ripping down of posters of kidnapped children. Ooh, that's a very big one, I think. Well, we can genocide can start with anti-Semitism, right? All genocide starts with dehumanization, so we got that on the line. That's definitely one thing we got on the line. What else do we have? See what they say over here. What are some of the highlights? I hate MSM so much. What I call Palestinians being shot on a college campus? Horrific, probably Islamophobic and hatred. Like, what do you want me to call that? Right? Like, what do you call that, huh? Like, I don't understand what your gotchas are. They're like in the ether. They have nothing to do with anything. Okay, this has nothing. Do we have to resort to Reddit for this? Is this what's gonna happen right now? We're gonna like try to find specific clips on Reddit? Because I think that's how that works. I do think that's how that works. Reddit. And then you search. Um Reddit can always help you find things. I love Reddit. Here we go. Palestinian protests have declared their intentions to bring London and hold a remembrance Sunday, blah, blah, blah. Calls for infight open Hamas terror, thousands of demonstrators, whatever, whatever. Go away. Ads, go away. Let's see the professor. Where's the professor here? I mean, it's quite befuddling to me how you keep doing this, how you keep misrepresenting entirely the argument. It's quite like unhinged in a way. It really is. I'm going to state this one more time, one last time, because it's getting ridiculous. No one is saying that simply chanting being anti-Semitic means genocide, or chanting for genocide. Did I state that statement? No, I didn't. We can go back and look at it. Never stated, not going to say that again. Nor have I said, I'm not misrepresenting anything. I'm saying that if you chant against Jewish students because you're anti-Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And then if you advocate for intifada and say that what Hamas did was legitimate, and you chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, you're advocating for genocide. No question in my fucking mind. You're not going to say it outright, but no question in my mind that if you could have it, every Jew in Israel would be ethnically cleansed from the land. And you think that by any means necessary, it is justified. If anyone invokes that, and it has been invoked, I'm trying to do the research right now, and I'm just, at this point, unless you start recognizing what my actual argument is, I'm not going to take the time to look it up. I'm going to continue working on my genocide video, and when it's released, you can go ahead and watch that. That's how simple that's going to be. I'm not going to take my time to research something that you're clearly not interested in actually discussing. It's a very simple thing for me. If you understand my argument, we'll keep looking for it. Other than that, there's really no point anymore, because I think you still don't understand what I'm saying. Let's see what this. Someone just sent me this, so let's talk about that. You say they aren't. I know they are. I've seen it. I'm trying to find it again because I haven't finished my video, but I've seen it. So, I couldn't find it because it doesn't exist. This is where it gets very, very interesting. Okay, then now I'm gonna have to find it. See, now I'm gonna have to find it. If you agree, if I find college students agreeing with the October 7th massacre, are you gonna change your mind? Real question. If I find, you're gonna change your mind? Okay, no problem. Here it comes. Here it comes. I'm looking up it right now. Well, this article right here, well, it's not video, but we'll get the video eventually because we're gonna find it, is already saying, okay, I gotta share it. That's why no one can see it. Ha ha ha. It's already saying over here, right? So a day of resistance, October 12th, right? In response to what happened? Look, the liberation, the beautiful liberation, stating, exhilarating. The attack on Israel was exhilarating and it was energizing. At the Albany Law School, assistant professor praised the Palestinian resistance in the wake of the attack. I bet you she was protesting. Do you disagree that she was protesting? Do you think this person, along with Free Palestine River to the Sea, is claiming for a genocide? I'm pretty sure she is. Right? They want an all-out Palestine rally. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Right? So come on. Let's get real with it. That's one. Let's keep looking. Let's keep looking. Students who praise the October 7th attack. Ooh, Haaretz. What do they have to say? You want? We're gonna get there. We're gonna not some crazy professor. You said a crazy professor. This professor is the leader, right? The faculty advisor for the Students for Justice in Palestine. Not just some random, and they're celebrating a day of resistance. So we got to find this protest of a day of resistance. That's what we have to find. But I'll get there. We're gonna edge it forward. We're gonna edge it forward. So, Students for Justice in Palestine described Saturday's mass murder carried by Hamas as a historic win for the resistance. Oh, come on, Haaretz. What's going on? Okay, let's try. Usually this works. Not found? Sad. Let's go ahead. Let's go find this protest. I'm sure we're going to find some gems in this protest. Day of Resistance, October 12th. So let's see. October 12th. Day of Resistance. Well, YouTube is not helpful, so we're going to try a different link. And then I think after we lay this to rest, we can move on to other things. You're done as soon as I get to the information? Now you're done? Yeah, of course. You can go. It's okay. Once I'm getting close to proving you wrong, you disappear. It's that simple, isn't it? Well, bye-bye. Yeah, sure. Black Lives Matter. I don't know what that has anything to do with anything. Let's see. We're going to get it. I'm getting it right now. You just don't want to see it. I'm obviously looking for it. Come on. Take a chill pill. These things take time. I just can't. You just don't want to wait along and see it. You're just not interested in seeing it. We're gonna get the footage for it. No, I don't. What is it being blocked? Ads are being blocked by my browser. Yeah, of course ads are being blocked by my browser. I don't care. Where's the X button for this little shit? I'm just gonna do this because I'm interested. Where's the footage? That sure looks like college students celebrating the October 7th massacre. Oof. Ooh, is this not what that is? Are we not seeing this right now? Ah. right? This is not when Israel was killing Palestinians or calling for a ceasefire, right? This is celebrating the October 7th attack. Hmm. Found one of them. Do we need more? We can do more. We can do more. We can I just found one. We can do more. You want more videos of students on campus celebrating the October 7th massacre? Because I can pull up more. We'll find them as we actually do the research properly. On October 12th, organized by the teacher that we talked about, Day of Resistance, Protest for Palestine, October 12th, right? Ohio State's the advisor for justice of people in Palestine. We have the video over here, right? We have it. That's not, this was called for on October 7th. Stop playing games. You got. Just deal with it. Yeah, most students do, Scott. I agree with you. Most, but it doesn't change the fact. Doesn't that students on campus celebrated the October 7th massacre? That students on campus have encircled Jews because of their anger towards Israel, and people on campus have protested from the river to the sea. And all of those things have met, and I believe that those groups have called for genocide. That's a call for genocide. It's clear as day. Any other evidence towards any other minority groups, whether it be black, LGBT, Hispanic, doesn't make a difference. Everyone will be up in arms. But for some reason, when it's Jews, people aren't up in arms. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But at this point, I think I've made my point clearly. It's very clear. Not everyone, some, and a lot. And that's all that needs to be said. Nothing more needs to be said. I do want to say, though, for those who don't know, Travis, who runs the Pangburn Discord, is doing his what's called the day. He does charity. So last year he gave over 2,000 meals for homeless people in Vancouver, and he's doing it again this year for the holidays. It's the 4th annual one. This is the 4th time he's done it, and that's what I'm talking about. So fantastic. Your Highness, at this point, I'm going to ignore you because the Day of Remembrance, as I'm gonna show it one more time, I think, because I think it's important to show it one more time just so it sinks across fully, and there's no just again ignoring of things that are being said or done. So here, where are they? One final time. The person who organized this, justice, the faculty, the advisor for Justice in Palestine, the Students for Justice in Palestine, called these attacks energizing and exhilarating, and praised the Palestinian resistance. These are a beacon for all of us, she has said. These are the same they did not call for ceasefire. That's not what was happening. And to be frank, calling for a ceasefire 4 days after 1,400 people of our civilians were massacred is not a ceasefire. It's just people being, oh, don't attack back. That's not how that works. Never going to happen. If Israel murdered 1,400 Palestinians in one shot, and then we expected Hamas or the PLO to not try to fuck back, that's not a thing. Let's not pretend. It's right here. It's clear. You can look up the article yourselves. You can look up these people. I'm not interested. Oh, here it is. I didn't change the screen. Here it is again. Exhilarating, energizing. The Palestinians a beacon for all of us, right? All that stuff. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We can go ahead and read on it again. We don't have to keep going back and forth. I think it's very clear what the situation is. 1,000% clear. I don't know if it's not terrorism. I guess it would be liberation or something. I don't know. Doesn't really make a difference. The point is that there has definitely been calls for Jewish genocide on campus. That does exist, and that needs to be condemned unequivocally. That's not how that works. 10,000%. This kind of makes me just want to talk about what does it mean when we say genocide? What should it mean when we say apartheid? And how we can understand that there are degrees to these things. So earlier I said something along the lines of, what did I say? I said something along the lines, Yes. Murder. Let's say I committed murder. You committed murder. I committed murder. This will make a difference. And the way I committed murder was I got into a fight with someone outside a bar. I was a little tipsy. They were a lot more drunk than me. We got into a fight. I punched him in the face, and as he fell down, I kind of gave him another good kick to the head. And they ended up killing him. And in court, it was found that that it wasn't just man 3, it was really man 2, and therefore it is murder. And now I'm considered a murderer. You can call me a murderer. That's fine. That's by definition fair. But let's say I was someone who, I don't know, stalked a girl for 2 weeks and found her, then killed her. I would also be a murderer. But these are two different types of murder. These are entirely different. And what's important to understand is by just calling these two same people murderers a pejorative or just out loud, that obfuscates, that it becomes loaded now. So terms like apartheid, terms like genocide are very loaded. It's important we use them carefully in our language. If by apartheid we mean any unequal treatment based on things other than race, ethnic groups, or whatever, we can say that there are some areas in the United States where it's an apartheid state. Like, we have to be very careful about our language and how we use it and why we use it and when we use it. So the chat is insane. Your Highness, you really have to read what people are saying and not put words into people's mouth. You do this a lot with me. You've done it here tonight. Now you're doing it to some other person in the chat. There's no need to do that. Actually try to respond to what people are saying, not to like the fantasies of what people are saying. Yeah, I'm gonna move on to more interesting. Let's talk about Andrew Tate or something much better than not. Here, let's watch this dumb YouTube short. Can I be gay and be a Christian? What a funny thing to say. Let's see.
Christian. If you mean by being gay and being a Christian that you are committed to Jesus and serving him faithfully while still having homosexual attractions, but recognizing those attractions are not from God and confessing those attractions and resisting those attractions at the same time, then yes, of course you can be a Christian. Yes, you're a Christian. But if you mean by being gay and a Christian that you are committed to Jesus and you're serving Jesus while at the same time embracing your same-sex attraction, acting on those attractions and celebrating your gay identity, the Bible is clear. Of course not. No, you're not a Christian in that lifestyle. The Bible would also say the same thing about a man or woman in here who embraces pornography and gives into it daily.
I can't believe I just watched that hot piece of garbage. I actually quite can't believe it. I cannot believe what I just watched. That was such a waste of time. Okay, well, let's make it very clear. That guy would not be considered Christian by like 90% of Christians who have existed before him. No question about it. And on top of that, let's say you are a Christian and you sin. Does that mean you're not a Christian? Even if you embrace some sins, does that mean that you're not a Christian? I can't believe that I was sent that video. That's a stupid fucking video. That's a really fucking stupid video. Well, listen, it's 9:36 right now where I'm at. I have not eaten dinner yet, so I'm going to go eat dinner. It's been fun chatting with everyone. Good guest. I'll try to upload that independently on the side. I want it to be more contentious, but sometimes personalities run thin. I should have a video out by the end of the week. It should be about genocide and what does it mean to have genocide? What does apartheid mean? And how loaded language can be problematic, and how we should be careful with our loaded language. And that's about. And I actually might have Yaron Brooks come on to the Sunday show, where John and I are going to be having a discussion, right versus left. So Yaron Brooks, for those who don't know, he's a libertarian, capitalist, down your throat, Randian objectivist, who might have very radical, genocidal, pro-Israel views, and I'm really looking forward to challenging that. So, as it may be, have a good night, everyone, and it's been amazing, and I'll see you next week. As always, stay thinking.
It'd be nice if we started with something. It'd be nice if we started with something quick and easy and simple, like God. In particular, I don't believe there is one, and I have no idea what your thoughts are on it.
You mean on the fact that you don't believe there is one?
I mean just about the subject in general, but I'm happy to hear your thoughts on about what I don't think is, well, maybe.
Well, it's a complicated problem, and I don't think that we take it with due seriousness. I specifically don't think that the celebrity atheist type